right, so you're saying using this mental technique, we could knock out 173 push-ups straight?
At least.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, so the chest have to touch the ground, or what are we doing?
We can go chest to the ground. That works for me.
So I'll stay with you. 1, 2.
Welcome back to the Spartan Up Podcast. Here we got Sephra, myself, David, Johnny Wake, and Joe.
Sergio.
And the unforgettable Marion.
Yeah. So Sir Joe just got knighted. The guys from More Hearts and Scars.
Just got knighted. Dangerous ceremony, but I came out the other side a sir, and I'm super excited about that and honored. This guy's amazing.
Yeah, Josh Mantz.
Yeah, amazing. Works at Tesla. Told me at Tesla they work around the clock, 24 hours a day. I asked, why is that? Stay tuned for the answer. We are here in San Francisco for Spartan Up Podcast with Josh Mantz. Do I have that name right?
You got it.
And you were in the military. You were infantry
officer for about 10 years.
10 years.
Yep.
How'd that go?
Probably wouldn't trade it for the world. Huge learning experience, start to finish. But probably the most profound time was during the deployment when I was pretty severely wounded by a sniper bullet. And kind of went through that experience and recovery.
What year was that?
So it was back in 2007 during the surge to Baghdad.
Got it. And so tell us about it.
Well, it was we were on a dismounted patrol through East Baghdad, and we basically detained a driver and were questioning him when a Hezbollah team came through and shot us with a sniper rifle. They actually converted a Dishka, which is normally an anti-aircraft weapon, into a sniper rifle. The bullet ripped through the left arm of one of my senior non-commissioned officers, severed his aorta, and then ricocheted into my upper right thigh and severed my femoral artery.
And you guys were in your vehicle?
No, we were actually dismounted outside of the vehicle when it occurred.
Got it. And the sniper was up on a rooftop? Or?
Correct. He was based a little bit away. So, in a split second, you had two people on the ground who had about 2 minutes to live apiece.
Wow. And how many guys on your side did you have with you?
Well, we had about 15 folks with us. But most critical to that situation at the time was the medic that we had on site. He was only 19 years old and realized he had 2 catastrophic injuries to deal with at the same time. So it was just amazing for me, as I continued that medical evacuation process, throughout this thing, just seeing how my team, how my medic reacted. It was, I was totally conscious through this whole experience. But that was the day where I learned what it meant to be part of a true team, that was well trained and well led.
Yeah, I mean they just went right to work.
It was just inspiring to me to see them work, not miss a step, even in the middle of this crisis. It was phenomenal.
And you think that happened because you do so much training, it just becomes innate?
Well, absolutely, it was part of it. A great example is when I was in the vehicle riding to the medical aid station. I was just trying to hold on and stay conscious, do everything I could. I had already lost the majority of my blood in the body, and I had a big wad of Copenhagen in my mouth when I got shot, which poses a choking hazard. But obviously, I wasn't thinking about it. And suddenly, I feel this as the medic. I feel him cinching up the tourniquet and doing his work, and then suddenly I feel a finger come into my mouth and sweep the Copenhagen away, throw it out, and just keep going. And for that second, I just stopped thinking about dying, and all I could think about was, wow, here's a kid in the middle of a catastrophe, and he still remembered to do his secondary checks. And it was just a moment that just put my mind at complete ease, knowing that I was in great hands. Couldn't have been prouder of him.
Have you seen him?
Yeah, I've seen him since then. We've kind of sporadically kept in touch, but he's doing great. Despite we did lose Staff Sergeant Marlon Harper that day, and unfortunately his injury was just severed aorta. He didn't last very long, but the efforts of that medic and the entire team that day were incredible, amazing.
So this podcast is about finding motivation, getting ahead in life, whether you're a monk or a mom or a business person. What is it what are the attributes that we could all learn that we could apply to become more successful? And so from that experience, what you just described, what comes out of that? One is, I guess, there's nothing negative you could say about training. Training is everything,
sure,
right?
Absolutely.
What else would you take from that?
There's there's so many components to this, but I almost have to reduce it down to the power of community and the power of human connection. I was, after I got to that aid station, I actually went on to flatline for 15 minutes straight before that medical team was able to bring me back. And the medical standard is typically 6 minutes. So if you're a complete flatline, completely coded, typically doctors and surgeons will call it on a patient after 6 minutes, because that's the point when serious brain damage sets in.
So you're flatline, let's say, for 6 minutes. The people around you are assuming he's dead.
Right.
And normally you walk away.
Normally that you're right, because even if you bring the person back, they would expect catastrophic brain damage at that point. So to go for somebody on fit for 15 minutes straight, defying all odds, I redeployed to Baghdad about 5 months after this injury occurred to finish the tour, and that medical team was still there. And one of the best days of my life was being able to thank them for bringing me back. And the first question I asked is, why did you work on a dead guy for 15 minutes? And he just looked at me and said 3 words: we never quit. He said you were healthy when you got here, you were alive when you got here, and we were not going to lose you. But it's
unbelievable, right?
It's just probably a lot of people watching this podcast, obviously a lot of military backgrounds and especially from the combat arms, and there tends to be a bit of a culture in the military where combat arms guys have a bit of a chip on their shoulder. The infantrymen know what combat's all about, and everybody else is just in support. And I never really subscribed to that mentality myself, but I never disproved it more than that day, right? Because I saw this medical team perform the most well-executed battle drill that I've ever seen in my life.
The support team.
Exactly. And then you have the echelons of support that go trace back all the way to the hospital, and the outcry of support from the community and every organization involved.
So sometimes we think we're successful in life because of ourselves, but in reality, it's usually the people around us that are all chipping in a little bit, right?
100%.
In your case, you wouldn't be here today.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with me. Obviously, it helped that I was in good physical condition going into this, and that helped, empower people to save me. Sure. But I would not be here today if it wasn't for the efforts of everybody else that day.
Why don't we do some push-ups, take a little break, right?
Let's do it.
And then we'll come back.
Sounds good.
All right.
All right.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
173 push-ups. You crushed it. That was unbelievable.
I don't know about that. We'll see.
So, what is this work you're doing in behavioral health?
So, I was really put in a position to, fortunately be able to leverage that story and that experience to drive some change in terms of people who've endured traumatic experiences throughout their lives, right? And help them recover and heal from that. I've found over the years, there tends to be a pretty big stigma surrounding the behavioral health field, and people think it's a sign of weakness to seek help. And certainly that's a component of it, and it always will be. But I found even more that a lot of the times these traumatic experiences spark injuries that are so deep and so profound that people don't know how to put them into words, right? And I'm specifically talking more on the moral injuries of it, like the shame, powerlessness, betrayal, and guilt that people experience. So over the last couple of years, we've been working with communities across the United States to really integrate the resources that already exist and help people come together using the power of community and human connection to help facilitate the
So give me
process.
an example of somebody that's gone through something that has that mental scarring.
Sure. For example, I know of one Marine medic that's a friend of mine who tried to seek treatment in the behavioral health field for years after his experiences in combat.
Who would he see? A psychologist, or?
Typically, there's multiple avenues to approach the behavioral health field. Some of them are effective, some of them are not.
Okay.
And it's critical to understand that like the first time somebody seeks help is often the most high risk time for that individual, because it's a very vulnerable position to be in when you first ask for help.
People don't naturally want to ask for help, right?
They're disclosing right. They're disclosing their darkest secrets, their biggest vulnerabilities. Yeah. And what we did is we put this gentleman and his spouse through a week-long retreat in the mountains of Infantry, New Mexico.
Love it.
And within a couple of days, he disclosed to the entire group to the very, very first time. And we had Vietnam vets, World War II vets, every combat generation represented from World War II forward. You had this very big, rough and tough Marine medic, right? Who people made the assumption that, maybe he killed people that he didn't want to kill. Maybe he saw a lot of violence and blood and guts and gore on the battlefield. And what he disclosed is pretty profound. He was part of the initial invasion into Baghdad, and certainly he did see a lot of carnage. He saw a lot of injuries, people missing limbs and legs. But as a corpsman, and because of the pace of that deployment, they were pushing through, and there was unfortunately a lot of collateral damage at the time. But he found that he couldn't help everybody, right? He had the capability to help them. He had the skill set to help them. But probably the most profound thing that he ever said was he looked at the helpless look in these people's eyes, and they just turned around and went home. And he knew that 90% of them died, after he left. So it had nothing to do with the blood and the guts and the gore. It was the powerlessness that he experienced to be able to help these people.
Because he couldn't solve that problem.
Exactly.
So how do you come to terms with it?
Well, part of leveraging the power of group dynamics in a retreat in that format, and recognizing first and foremost that sense of powerlessness can be crippling. It can lead to a huge sense of shame and guilt, and those are the emotions that ultimately bring you down. So uncovering that just to begin with, verbalizing it, and recognizing who your enemy is and what you're facing is the first step to achieving, walking down the healing path.
Sure.
So just the recognition of it almost gave him permission.
Getting it off your chest,
right?
And talking to somebody about it.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what really facilitated the beginning of his healing process.
So anybody out there listening that's been straddling something that they deal with, get it out there.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
Go talk to somebody, anybody.
Absolutely. And what I've noticed, a lot of people are.
Maybe the Catholic Church had it right with confession.
There might be there definitely could be a component to that, right? The truth is, all of us have the power to impact somebody's life in that way. You don't need to deploy to combat in order to be able to resonate and kind of dive that deep with somebody and understand, or at least appreciate the root cause of what they're experiencing.
So you survived flatlining.
Yep.
You're helping people come out of their deep, dark moments, and now you're at Tesla.
Yep.
Which there isn't a person in the world, unless they've been living under a rock, doesn't know what Tesla is. They're awesome vehicles. Obviously, Musk is pushing limits in every area of technology. What are you guys doing there that's cool that you could disclose?
It's like you said, it's pretty obvious with the latest release of the Generation 3, the Model 3 car, and the response we got from the public. There's a huge buzz around the company, and it's obvious that the integration of the technology is just absolutely mind-blowing. Probably more importantly, though, as you talk transitioning and redefining career fields, whether it's due to injury or disease or illness, I can tell you hands down that I am hard-pressed to find a more dedicated employee base at any point in my career than what I see at Tesla right now.
And you mean ex-military they're bringing, or just in general?
Just in general. It doesn't have to be military, right? I appreciate people who are professional and committed to the mission and purpose at hand. And
why is that? Why is Tesla able to draw such committed people? Because it's one of the things we talk about on the podcast is people that are just interested versus people that are committed.
Sure.
Interested is when things are fun and then you're involved, but when you're committed, you're committed. Rain, snow, blood, doesn't matter.
Right.
Why do you think Tesla's pulling those kinds of people?
Mission and purpose. It all comes down to mission and purpose. Right. Facilitating the world's transition to a solar electric economy is a very profound task. It's a mission that people want to be part of, and it's a mission that's not easy to accomplish. So I've actually found the transition, even for myself, as you latch onto a pretty profound mission and purpose in the military over the last decade, I found that it was quite an easy transition for me in terms of having purpose in my life and being able to dedicate myself to a greater cause.
That's a great point, because if people are just working and they don't know what they're working towards, I guess you can't get as excited about it. But I guess you're right, you're doing something big.
Right, exactly.
And you got to relay that to the workforce, and the workforce buys into it, the ones that show up.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And it's the difference of, employee engagement is kind of a big term out there these days, but it's really important. It's not just a soft word that doesn't mean anything. It's if you find yourself in a job or in a position where you're not connected to the purpose of the organization, and you can't find that for yourself. Certainly it could be challenging to find that in some jobs or in some roles. It might be more beneficial to find it at a place like Spartan Race. Where you're offering that to people and a chance for them to latch on to something more profound and greater than just themselves. Right?
I love it. That was, and I'm glad you're alive.
Good stuff.
That was awesome.
Hey, thanks, Joe.
Hey, thank you for your service.
No, hey, no problem. No problem.
Incredible to have two stories in one there. I mean, the whole Tesla thing and that aspect, what's going on now. But first I want to go back to his story about being shot as a sniper over in combat, and that whole situation about having to trust a 19-year-old medic to pull you through that and everything involved in that. Unbelievable.
Think about how much time we all spend when we go to a doctor, right? And you want to find the right doctor with the right skill set that went to the right school.
For your earache.
This guy took a bullet. He is basically dead. Mm-hmm. Basically dead. Mm-hmm. And a 19-year-old, whether trained or not, you don't know when you're laying there, right? Is working on him. He dies. Mm-hmm. He dies about 15 minutes, mm-hmm. right?
He's fighting to stay conscious as far as he can.
But for all intents and purposes, like
he's
he was
dead,
gone.
Flatline, gone. And later, asked the kid, "Why'd you keep working on me? You went past the threshold of when you're supposed to stop." Mm-hmm. He said, "I don't give up on anybody."
Yeah,
powerful statement.
And then to come out of that and like you say, find his purpose, which is what allows you to work 24 hours a day, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I was look, we build businesses, right? Spartan's a business, and how do you get the place humming like Tesla? And he said, I got to tell you, he goes, this place, well, you guys heard it, is more intense than battle. And from a guy
who essentially died on the battlefield.
How? And he comes back with mission and purpose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Yeah, incredible. Mission and purpose are everything, right? And what was he saying about that? That's it might actually be confusing with this another interview, but the same thing came up. But the idea that you can't. I am confused with another interview where the guy said you can't just hire people on remuneration. You can't just hire them on opportunity to advance. The only way you're going to get people is to be part of a purpose and part of a company with a mission.
No doubt about it. And I'm sure our resident philosopher might have an opinion around this.
What's important about purpose? Why do people need purpose?
Oh, I'm not really sure. Why people need purpose. This is something I've kind of struggled with the past 4 or 5 years. Is why do people need a reason to do what they're doing? It might just be a human thing. It might be, I don't know. It might help us in some way. Apparently it does for a lot of people. But it brings me back to what happened at the Agoge, Joe, when I was breaking down at hour 24, and you were telling me that the reasons I was stating for giving up and quitting were not actually things I should listen to. That made me think, which are the good reasons we come up with that we should listen to, and which are the good reasons that we come up with that we shouldn't listen to? Because we always think we have good reasons.
It's not static, right? It depends on where you are at that moment. And I looked at you. I had a fresh perspective that you didn't have. Mm-hmm. And you were healthy. You were coherent. You weren't pissing blood. There was no reason for you to be getting out of the event. Now, your leg was just a casualty. But but your leg wasn't bothering me to that point. But you said something interesting that ties right into this podcast. You responded to me and said, but it's not my true north. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So your purpose in your mind at that moment was not to finish the Agoge. It didn't matter to you. You weren't trying to prove anything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And but I knew from my experience, Johnny would have told you the same thing, that the repercussions of quitting at that moment would have been much worse for you than continuing. Mm-hmm. You didn't have a good enough reason to quit. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and with that, and the whole idea of purpose too, we can invent purpose. And I think back to 2011, when I finished the death race that year. And there was a girl back in my hometown who I knew had survived cancer as an adolescent, and I had raised, I think it was $8,000 for charity helping children dealing with cancer. And when I was about to quit, I remember thinking, you got to be kidding me. This girl for 3 years kept going. And I've told everyone I'm going to do it. And so the whole idea of purpose, I know what you're saying about that the Agoge weekend, it wasn't the most important thing in the world to you, and I totally get that. Mm-hmm. And so it's valid at that point to say it's not the most important thing in the world to me, I'm going to stop. I actually had to borrow on purpose from someone else, where I needed to take an outside reason, make it my own reason, and make it so compelling that I couldn't quit. And I think that's hugely important in anything, like in business. To decide what your purpose is and then create that leverage, I think is
well,
huge.
think about, with Tesla, because I've been thinking about it a lot since he said this. Obviously, Tesla is extremely successful. The people that are humming along and working 24 hours a day, as he puts it, are saying, "Wait a minute, we're going to create an electric car revolution."
We're not just cars anymore. They're going to power the entire world. Is their plan?
Yeah, and so when you buy into that, right, and maybe you didn't have a deep enough purpose when you entered the Agoge regarding finishing, right? Maybe
absolutely.
And you got lucky. Maybe you thought of the woman with cancer at the right moment in time. Yeah. But it goes back to your question you asked yourself, Dave, is purpose important? It obviously is, because when you hit the speed bump, which everybody hits, you got to reach back and find something.
Well, and sorry, go ahead, Sephra.
No, what it makes me think of just listening to you guys is saying, like, purpose is one thing, but mentorship is another thing, right? Because the ability to be in the situation that you're in and have people around you that can zoom up and have seen the pattern and have seen people go through this and do know what the learning is, do know what that outcome is, that's the most important part. To have the Johnnies and the Joes and the people around you that are like, we know where you're at, we've seen it a lot of times before, and we know what this pattern looks like. That goes beyond purpose. And I think, like, mentorship, whether it's in business or whether it's when you're in the middle of the Agoge, is like the most important thing, and a thing in our society that needs to be re-strengthened and re-embraced. Does that make
it totally does. And you look at it from the standpoint of a culture too. There's mentorship in terms of one-on-one, but as a culture, and you go back to Tesla, the idea that they don't hire people who haven't bought into that purpose wholeheartedly. So,
or working 24 hours a day. Do they literally work 24 hours?
Well, I think what he means is you never turn off. Like, you go home and you're sleeping thinking about the project. You come back the next morning, you're back on the job. Nobody can work 24 hours a day, but you can be engaged 24 hours a day for sure. And I'm sure they're working 18 hours a day. But
and is that good?
Well, yes and no. The thing is, it's not good to go to a job that you don't really care about and work hours like that. If you're going to the job that you don't love and you're putting in that much overtime, eventually you're going to break down, you're going to stop. But if it's truly your purpose, if you've bought into the idea that this is how I'm going to change the world, there's nothing you'd rather be doing anyway. So it's not that Tesla is a slave driving factory where they're just like whipping everyone into shape. It's that they have people so dialed into their purpose that there's nowhere they'd rather be and nothing they'd rather be doing.
And so maybe, sorry to interrupt you, maybe David didn't do, and we didn't do a gut check on him entering that event, right?
Yeah, and it's funny, I've seen that happen with people where you'll say, you should do the death race. And maybe at that point in their life, it's not that they shouldn't, but there isn't a compelling reason for it. Right. Whereas, when I see the people who finished, generally, and I've been asked this before about, is there a common thread? And I said, with a few exceptions, it's people who are proving something. They're bouncing back from something. Right. This is their testing ground for themselves in their life, right? And I talked to Jonathan Westerfeld, who did not finish this Agoge, and he said, it wasn't in it. Now, a couple years ago, I saw him finish a death race that he almost died, but he kept going because at that moment he needed to, right? That said, sometimes when you have failed at something because you didn't have enough of a reason, I'm not saying this is the case, but you may very well go home and lie awake in bed a couple nights going, why didn't I finish that? There were guys there weaker than I was that finished it, and it starts to eat at you. The next one becomes much, much easier because then you have something to prove, right? But that
all goes back to find your purpose.
Yeah, 100%.
Find your purpose, lock onto it, and then you'll be relentless in getting it done.
And I think about these podcasts, and the purpose of these podcasts has been to figure out grit, to figure out success. What is it that drives people and keeps them moving? And we've done coming up on a couple hundred now.
And sometimes those races help you find your purpose.
Sure, absolutely, yeah.
Because sometimes you need that clarity. You need to push yourself beyond your comfort to figure out what the heck it is you're trying to do.
And my purpose, and my purpose right now is coming back to the clothes that I was going to do.
So we're going to purposely go to SpartanUpThePodcast.com. Just SpartanUp.com. Don't worry about the podcast. Spartan Up.
Keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Spartan Up Pod. Can someone help me? Subscribe. I know you need to subscribe.
Subscribe to the Spartan Up Podcast. Thanks for listening.
We're on iTunes. We're on YouTube. SpartanUpPodcast.com. Thanks, Ephra.
I'll be finding my purpose and the website.
Thank you for listening to another epic story of success.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. To find more show notes, audio, and video, please visit us at SpartanUpPodcast.com.
The Spartan Up Podcast is brought to you by Spartan.
To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.